Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the gritty, gaslit chaos of Victorian London, where the streets pulse with life and danger in equal measure. Picture yourself stumbling through narrow, cobblestoned alleys, the air thick with coal smoke and the stench of unwashed bodies. Horses clatter past, splashing mud onto your already tattered clothes, while street vendors hawk pies of questionable origin. You're shoulder to strangers, their faces etched with exhaustion, all hustling to survive another day. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this unscathed. Life here is a gauntlet of disease, crime, and sheer bad luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the heart of London, 1880s, where the streets are a living, breathing beast. The population has exploded to over 4 million, making this city the largest in the world, a fact historians love to toss around when bragging about the British Empire's peak. People pour in from the countryside, chasing jobs in factories or hoping to strike it rich, but most find themselves crushed by the city's weight. You're jostled by a tide of top hats, ragged shawls, and barefoot kids darting between legs, all moving at a frantic pace. The noise is relentless. Cartwheels creak, hawkers shout, and somewhere a dog barks like it's auditioning for the apocalypse. You try to find your footing, but the ground is slick with horse dung and something you'd rather not identify. A street lamp flickers, casting shadows that make every passerby look vaguely menacing. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Londoners swear by a lucky charm, a dried potato carried in their pocket to ward off bad vibes. Sounds like something your weird uncle would try, right? But don't laugh too hard. You're tempted to clutch one yourself as a costermonger eyes your worn-out boots. The streets are a maze, and getting lost is easy. Wide boulevards like Regent Street glitter with shops for the wealthy. But turn a corner and you're in a warren of alleys where laundry sags on ropes and the air smells like despair. Historians still argue whether this overcrowding was a sign of progress or a recipe for collapse. Did the city's growth fuel innovation or just misery? You push forward, weaving through a crowd of flower girls and fishmongers, their hands chapped from work. The sheer density of people is suffocating. Personal space is a luxury you can't afford. You pass a pub spilling drunks onto the pavement, their slurred songs mingling with the cries of a newsboy shouting about a murder in Whitechapel. Violence is never far away, and you keep one hand on your pocket, hoping your last few pennies stay yours. The street is a theater of survival, and you're an unwilling actor. A woman with a tray of wilted cabbages offers you a deal, her voice hoarse from yelling all day. You decline, mostly because you're broke, but also because you're pretty sure that cabbage has seen better days, probably in 1875. Every step feels like a gamble. The crowd surges, and you're carried along like driftwood in a river. A man in a patched coat tries to sell you a genuine watch, but it's ticking suspiciously loud, like it's counting down to its own demise. You shake your head and keep moving, the cold seeping through your thin coat. The streets are alive, yes, but they're also brutal, a churning machine that grinds down anyone who can't keep up. You're already exhausted, and it's barely noon. Somewhere in the distance, church bells toll, a faint reminder that time marches on, whether you're ready or not. You're still trudging through Victorian London's chaotic streets. The clamor of hawkers and hooves a constant drone in your ears. Now, though, your throat feels parched, and you're eyeing a nearby pump for a quick drink. Bad move. The water in this city is a silent killer. And cholera's grip is tighter than a miser's fist. In the 1850s, Dr. John Snow proved cholera spread through contaminated water, a mainstream fact that changed how cities handle sanitation. But here, in the 1880s, progress is slow, and you're rolling the dice every time you take a sip. The River Thames, London's main water source, is basically an open sewer, carrying everything from factory runoff to human waste. You notice a faint, sour smell as you approach the pump, and the water looks cloudy, like it's plotting something sinister. You hesitate, but thirst wins, and you cup your hands under the spout, hoping for the best. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Londoners believe drinking gin with their water purifies it, which is about as effective as using a paper towel to stop a flood. You're tempted to try it, if only to calm your nerves, but the gin carts nearby look shadier than a back alley deal. The streets around you buzz with life, yet death is never far off. Cholera outbreaks, like the one in 1866 that killed thousands, are a grim memory for locals. You overhear a woman whispering to her friend about a neighbor who went blue overnight. Cholera's gruesome nickname, cyanosis, from the bluish tint of dying skin. You swallow hard, your stomach churning, and not just from the water you just drank. Historians still argue whether the government's slow response to cholera was due to ignorance or just penny-pinching politics. Did they not know better, or did they not care enough? Either way, you're stuck in the fallout. The pump you're at is one of thousands across London, many drawing from wells tainted by nearby cesspools. You glance at the ground and notice a suspiciously damp patch nearby. Yup, that's probably not rainwater. The city's sanitation is a patchwork of half-measures. Pipes are being laid, but they're nowhere near enough. You step back, wiping your hands on your coat, which, let's be honest, isn't much cleaner. A kid runs by, splashing through a puddle you'd rather not think about, and you wonder how anyone survives this place. You keep moving, passing a street vendor selling fresh watercress, though the leaves look like they've been dunked in the Thames for flavor. You're not falling for that one. Last thing you need is a side of dysentery with your greens. A horse-drawn omnibus rumbles past, its driver shouting at pedestrians to clear the way. You dodge just in time, but the spray of mud on your trousers feels like a personal insult. The air is thick with coal smoke, and you cough, wondering if the water or the air will get you first. A man in a tattered top hat offers you a pamphlet on miracle tonics to ward off disease, but you wave him off. Those quack cures are about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. You pass a group of women washing clothes in a brownish water, their hands red and raw. They're chatting about a recent cholera scare in the East End, where entire families vanished in days. You try not to listen, but the fear is contagious. Every sip, every breath feels like a gamble in this city. You spot a pub ahead, its sign promising pure ale, and for a moment you're tempted. Ale's safer than water, right? But your pockets are light, and the pub's crowded with workers drowning their own fears. You keep walking, the pump's handle glinting mockingly behind you. The streets are still packed, the noise unrelenting, but now you're hyper-aware of every cough, every puddle, every risk. Survival here isn't just about dodging pickpockets. It's about outsmarting the very water you need to live. You're still weaving through Victorian London's crowded streets, the stench of the Thames fading slightly as you turn into a narrower lane. Now, a looming brick building looms ahead, its iron gates creaking like they're auditioning for a ghost story. This is the workhouse, the so-called refuge for those who've hit rock bottom. And trust me, in this city, rock bottom is a crowded place. You step inside, and the air grows heavy with the smell of damp stone and despair. The workhouse system, cemented by the 1834 Poor Law Amendment Act, a mainstream fact that reshaped how Britain dealt with poverty, is designed to deter idleness, but it feels more like punishment for being poor. You're here because you've got no money, no job, and no choice. The clerk at the door eyes you like you're a stray dog, scribbling your name in a ledger before shoving you toward a dormitory. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workhouses serve a gruel so thin it's nicknamed skilly, and rumor has it inmates once found a rat tail in the pot. Bon appetit. You're handed a bowl of this watery sludge, and you're not sure if it's food or a cruel prank. The room is packed with men, women, and kids, all separated like livestock, their faces gray with exhaustion. You're told to pick oakum, unraveling old ropes into fibers until your fingers bleed. It's mind-numbing work, and the overseer barks at anyone who slows down. You glance at a kid no older than 10, struggling with a pile of hemp, and your heart sinks. Historians still argue whether workhouses were a necessary evil or just plain evil. Did they save lives or break spirits? The walls are damp, and the straw mattress you're assigned smells like it's been through a few too many winters. You lie down, but sleep is impossible with the coughing and muttering around you. A woman nearby whispers about escaping, but the guards are always watching, and the punishment for running is a month of hard labor, or worse. You remember that dodgy water from the pump, and wonder if you'd have been better off taking your chances on the streets. At least there, you could breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. A bell rings, signaling another round of work, and you drag yourself up, your back already aching. You're shuffled to a yard to break stones, each swing of the hammer jarring your bones. The other inmates are a mix of the desperate and the defeated. Some are here for a night, others for years. You overhear a man joking that the workhouse is like a hotel, but with worse food and no checkout. You'd laugh, but your hands are blistered, and the overseer's glare kills any humor. The stones you're breaking will pave London's streets, a bitter irony. You're building the city that's breaking you. A girl nearby collapses, too weak to lift her hammer, and the overseer snaps at her to get up. You want to help, but interference means trouble, and you're already on thin ice. The day drags on, and you're given a sliver of bread and a cup of tea so weak it's basically hot water with regrets. You choke it down, dreaming of the pies you saw vendors hawking earlier, even if they were probably stuffed with mystery meat. The workhouse is a machine, grinding down everyone inside, and you're just another cog. As night falls, you're herded back to the dormitory, the air thick with the snores of the exhausted. You lie there, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how long you can survive this. The city outside hums on, indifferent, while you're trapped in this gray limbo, counting the hours until dawn. You've escaped the workhouse's suffocating walls, but the streets of Victorian London offer no warm welcome. You're now trailing a group of scrawny kids, their bare feet slapping against the cobblestones as they dart toward a factory's iron gates. Child labor is the grim heartbeat of this city, and you're about to see it up close. By the 1870s, laws like the Factory Act's mainstream milestones have started limiting work hours for kids. But loopholes and lax enforcement mean children as young as 6 still toil in dangerous jobs. You follow them inside, the air thick with dust and the roar of machinery. The kids scatter to their posts, some climbing rickety scaffolds to clean looms, others feeding coal into furnaces. You're handed a broom and told to sweep, but your eyes are on a boy, barely 8, whose tiny hands work a spinning mule with terrifying speed. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some factory owners claim kids are perfect for tight spaces, like crawling under machines to clear jams, never mind the missing fingers or crushed bones. You wince as the boy ducks under a whirring belt, his face smudged with grease and fear. The factory is a beast, all clanging metal and hissing steam, and you're half expecting it to swallow someone whole. Historians still argue whether child labor fueled London's industrial boom or just exploited its most vulnerable. Progress at what cost? You sweep the floor, but the dust sticks to your throat, and you're coughing like you've inhaled a chimney. A girl nearby, her apron torn, sneezes into her sleeve, and you hope it's just dust, not something worse from that dodgy pump water. The overseer, a man with a mustache like a grumpy caterpillar, barks at you to move faster. You glance at the kids, their eyes dull with exhaustion, and wonder how they keep going. One girl, maybe 10, ties threads with fingers so nimble it's almost hypnotic, but her cough sounds like it's auditioning for a tuberculosis diagnosis. You want to tell her to rest, but rest means no pay, and no pay means no food. The factory clock ticks like a countdown to collapse, and you're already aching after an hour. A kid nearby jokes that the machines sing better than the pub drunks, and you crack a smile, but it fades when you see his bandaged hand, probably caught in a gear last week. You pass a window, but it's so grimy you can barely see the street outside. The air is stifling, and sweat drips down your back despite the chill. You overhear 2 women whispering about a kid who fell into a dye vat last month, gone before anyone could fish him out. The story makes your stomach lurch, but you keep sweeping, dodging a cart piled with cotton bales. The factory's output, textiles, tools, shoes, keeps London's economy humming, but at a cost you can't unsee. Another boy, hauling a sack twice his size, stumbles, and you catch his arm before he hits the floor. He mumbles thanks, but the overseer's glare sends him scrambling back to work. As the day drags on, you're handed a bucket to carry coal, and your shoulders scream with every step. The kids around you move like ghosts, their childhoods traded for pennies. You spot a girl sneaking a crust of bread from her pocket, eating it like it's her last meal. Maybe it is. The whistle finally blows, signaling a break, but it's only 10 minutes, barely enough time to gulp stale water from a shared tin cup. You lean against a wall, watching the kids slump in corners, too tired to play. The factory's hum never stops, and neither does the grind of this city. You're free to leave, unlike these kids, but the weight of their lives sticks to you as you step back into the crowded streets. You're back on Victorian London streets, the factory's clamor still ringing in your ears as you step into a world swallowed by fog. The air is so thick you can barely see 10 feet ahead, a soupy mix of coal smoke and river mist that clings to your skin like a bad decision. This is the infamous London particular, a pea soup fog so dense it's practically a character in this city's story. By the 1880s, industrial pollution has turned London's air into a toxic haze. Mainstream science links it to thousands of respiratory deaths yearly, though no one's counting the coughs you're choking back right now. You pull your scarf over your mouth, but it's about as useful as a paper umbrella in a storm. The fog smells like burnt coal and regret, and every breath feels like you're inhaling a chimney's diary. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Londoners swear wearing a vinegar-soaked rag around their neck wards off the fog's bad airs. Spoiler, it just makes you smell like a pickled onion. You're tempted to try it, if only to distract from the grit coating your tongue. The streets are eerily quiet, the fog muffling the usual chaos of hawkers and hooves. You squint, barely making out a gas lamp's faint glow, and nearly trip over a kid selling matches, his tiny voice cutting through the haze like a sad song. Historians still argue whether the fog was just a weather quirk or a man-made disaster. Did industry doom the city's lungs, or was London just cursed by geography? You shuffle forward, your boots slipping on the slick cobblestones. A horse-drawn cab looms out of the fog, nearly clipping you, and the driver yells something you're glad the haze muffles. You're not sure where you're going, but standing still feels like inviting trouble. The fog hides more than just buildings. Pickpockets love this weather, and you clutch your coat tighter, remembering those empty pockets from the workhouse. A woman in a tattered shawl brushes past, coughing so hard you wince, wondering if it's the fog or something nastier, like that cholera-laced water you dodged earlier. The air's so thick you're half convinced you could cut it with a knife and sell it as soup. You pass a pub, its windows glowing like a beacon, but the laughter inside feels miles away. A man stumbles out, his face red from gin, and he offers you a sip from a bottle that looks like it's seen better days, probably before you were born. You decline, mostly because you'd rather not add poisoned by mystery liquor to your day. The fog swirls, revealing a street vendor with a tray of roasted chestnuts, their smoky scent a brief reprieve from the coal stink. You're broke, so you just inhale deeply, pretending it's a meal. He jokes that the fog's free seasoning, and you chuckle, but your lungs aren't laughing. The streets feel like a maze now, every turn disorienting. You hear a distant scream, accident or crime, you can't tell, and decide to keep moving. The fog's so bad that omnibuses have stopped running, and you see a crowd of stranded workers huddling under a shop awning, their faces pale as ghosts. One mutters about a friend who never came home in a fog like this, lost to a riverbank or a thief's blade. You pull your coat closer, the damp seeping into your bones. The city's pulse is still there, but it's smothered, like a blanket under a blanket. You're starting to think that vinegar rag wasn't such a bad idea after all. But for now, you just keep walking, hoping the fog lifts before it chokes you out. You're still navigating Victorian London's foggy streets. The pea soup haze from earlier thinning just enough to reveal a seedier underbelly. You've wandered into a cramped alley off Whitechapel, where gas lamps flicker like they're too nervous to stay lit. Crime is the pulse of these streets, and you feel it now, a prickling on your neck as shadows shift in the gloom. The Metropolitan Police, founded in 1829, a mainstream fact that birthed modern policing, patrols a city of over 4 million with just a few thousand bobbies, leaving alleys like this one lawless. You grip your coat, those empty workhouse pockets a grim reminder of what you've got to lose, and hurry past a doorway where a man's silhouette looms, his eyes glinting like a cat's. Here's a quirky tidbit. Pickpockets, or dippers, often train kids as young as 5 to snatch wallets, using a bell-rigged dummy to practice. Miss the bell, get a beating. You spot a boy, barely tall enough to reach your waist, weaving through the crowd, his fingers darting like minnows. You pat your pockets, relieved they're still empty, but your heart skips when he flashes a grin sharper than a razor. Historians still argue whether crime surged from poverty's desperation or the police's inability to keep up. Were the streets chaotic because of empty bellies or overstretched bobbies? You're not sure, but the knife-scarred wall beside you suggests it's a bit of both. Another quirky fact for good measure. Some thieves smear treacle on their hands to slip out of handcuffs, a sticky trick that's about as reliable as your chances of staying safe here. You dodge a man hawking protection for a penny, his grin missing teeth like a broken piano. Safer than a Bobby's whistle, he jokes, but you're not buying. His knuckles look like they've punched more than just air. The alley narrows, the air thick with damp brick and the sour tang of spilled gin. A woman in a tattered bonnet hisses about a stolen scarf for sale, her bruised cheek telling a story she won't. You wave her off, nearly tripping over a stray dog gnawing a bone. Please, let it just be a bone. A Bobby's whistle shrieks nearby, and you freeze, pulse racing. It's just a drunk being dragged off, his slurred curses fading into the fog, but the sound reminds you how fragile safety is. You pass a pub, its windows glowing like a false promise, where a brawl spills onto the cobblestones, broken bottles sparkling like grim confetti. A newsboy shouts about a murder in Spitalfields, another unfortunate woman found in an alley, and the crowd buzzes with morbid curiosity. You skirt around, avoiding a man who bumps you, his sorry as convincing as a three-legged horse. You feel his hand graze your coat, but your pockets are still empty. Score one for poverty, you think wryly. You reach a wider street, but the crowds offer no comfort. A street performer strums a banjo, joking that his tune scares off cutthroats better than a Bobby's truncheon. You smirk, but the laughter dies when you notice a garroter's rope dangling from a lamppost, a grim warning left by someone with a point to prove. The city's a predator, and you're just trying not to be prey. You pass a costermonger's cart, its owner yelling about fresh apples that look like they've been through a cholera outbreak. Every shadow feels like a threat, every stranger a potential thief. You're getting used to the paranoia, and that's the scariest part. You keep moving, eyes sharp, the alley's dangers lingering like the fog, but at least you've made it out, for now. You've just slipped out of that crime-ridden alley, the echo of the Bobby's whistle still tingling your nerves, and now you're back in the churn of Victorian London streets. The fog's lifted a bit, but the air's still heavy, and you're noticing something new, the sheer misery of where people live. You're standing in front of a sagging tenement, its brick walls stained black from coal smoke, windows patched with rags. Housing in the 1880s is a nightmare for most. Overcrowding is so bad that entire families cram into single rooms, a mainstream fact backed by reports like those from the 1885 Royal Commission on the Housing of the Working Classes, which exposed the slum's squalor. You step inside and the smell hits you. Damp wood, unwashed bodies, and a whiff of something you hope isn't coming from the shared privy out back. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tenants keep pigs in their rooms, thinking it's practical for food scraps, until the landlord catches wind and the pig becomes tomorrow's bacon. You dodge a pile of questionable refuse on the stairs and climb to a room where 8 people are packed like sardines. A mother huddles with 3 kids on a straw mattress, while an old man coughs in the corner, his breath rattling like a broken window pane. The walls are so thin, you hear the neighbors arguing about who stole whose turnip. Historians still argue whether these slums were a failure of government policy or just the inevitable fallout of a booming city, neglect or necessity. You're not sure, but the damp seeping into your boots suggests the answer isn't pretty. The room's lit by a single candle, its flicker casting shadows that make the cracks in the ceiling look like a map to nowhere. You're offered a corner to sit, but the floor's sticky, and you're pretty sure that's not just spilled tea. A kid, no older than 6, is scrubbing a pot with water you wouldn't touch after that cholera scare. You remember those factory kids, their hands raw from work, and realize they probably live in places like this, trading one grind for another. A woman next door yells about rats big as cats, and you glance at the walls, half expecting one to wave hello. You joke to yourself that at least the rats pay no rent, but the thought sours when you see a cockroach scuttle across the floor. You step outside for air, but the courtyard's worse. Laundry sags on ropes, dripping gray water onto puddles that reflect the gas lamp's glow. A man in a patched coat offers to sell you a prime bed for the night, but his grin says it's probably a doorway with extra fleas. You decline, your stomach twisting at the thought of sleeping here. The tenement's alive with noise, babies crying, couples bickering, someone singing a drunken tune about lost love. You spot a girl selling wilted flowers, her bare feet blue from the cold, and you wish you had a penny to spare. Instead, you offer a nod, and she smiles like it's the best thing she's seen all day. The street outside isn't much better. More tenements line the road, their windows like tired eyes staring into the void. You pass a family hauling their belongings in a cart, evicted for missing rent by a shilling. The landlord, twirling a mustache like he's auditioning for a villain, watches them go without a flicker of pity. You're starting to think that pickpocket from the alley might have been onto something. Stealing seems easier than surviving this. But you keep walking, the weight of the slums pressing down, each step a reminder that for most Londoners, home is just another battleground. The city's pulse hums on, but here it's a heartbeat struggling to keep going.
You're still trudging through Victorian London's grimy streets, the tenement's damp misery clinging to your boots as you weave through the evening crowds. Your stomach growls, loud enough to rival the street vendors' shouts, but food here is a gamble between starvation and poison. The city's markets are bursting, yet hunger stalks the poor. Reports from the 1880s, like those by reformer Charles Booth, reveal nearly a third of Londoners live below the poverty line, scraping by on whatever they can find. You pass a stall piled with shriveled potatoes and fish so questionable it's practically winking at you. The air smells of burnt fat and rotting fruit, and you're wondering if that skilly from the workhouse wasn't so bad after all. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some desperate souls buy penny pies filled with meat that's more likely to be alley cat than beef. Bon appetit if you're brave enough. You eye a vendor hawking such pies, his grin as greasy as the pastry. You're not tempted. Your empty pockets and that cholera scare keep you cautious. The crowd jostles you toward a baker's cart where stale bread sells for a farthing, but even that's out of reach. Historians still argue whether food scarcity was due to market greed or just too many mouths to feed, profiteering or overpopulation. Either way, your stomach's staging a full-on rebellion. You spot a woman scavenging apple cores from a gutter, her hands trembling as she tucks them into a rag. You want to look away, but the city forces you to see. A kid nearby, his ribs sharp under his shirt, tries to swipe a turnip from a stall, only to get a cuff from the vendor. You wince, remembering those factory kids, their faces pale from hunger as much as exhaustion. A man in a tattered coat jokes that the rats here eat better than he does, and you force a smile, but the truth stings. You pass a pub, its warm glow spilling onto the street, where workers drown their hunger in cheap ale. You're tempted, but ale won't fill the hole in your gut. The market's chaos is relentless. Vendors shout about fresh oysters, but the greenish tint suggests they've been out of the sea too long. You dodge a cart of wilting cabbages, their smell mingling with the ever-present coal smoke. A woman offers you a bowl of soup from a steaming pot, but it looks like the Thames cousin, and you politely decline. She shrugs, muttering about picky eaters, and you almost laugh. Picky's not the word when survival's on the line. You spot a costermonger tossing bruised apples into a pile for the poor, and a crowd scrambles like it's gold. You're too slow, and a boy snags the last one, grinning like he's won a lottery. The street narrows, and you're pressed against a wall as a horse cart rumbles by, its driver cursing at a beggar blocking the way. You notice a chalkboard sign, "No credit, no food." The city's hunger is a beast, and you're feeling its claws. A girl selling chestnuts sings a tune about hot nuts, warm hearts, and you wish you could buy some, if only for her smile. Instead, you keep moving, the market's noise fading behind you. Your stomach's still complaining, but you're learning fast. Here, hunger's just another neighbor, always knocking. The city's lights flicker, and you wonder how anyone finds enough to eat without losing their soul to these streets. You're still weaving through Victorian London's relentless streets. The market's sour stench of rotting fruit and desperation lingering in your nose. Your empty stomach's grumbling, but now you're noticing something else. The stark divide between the city's haves and have-nots. The 1880s see London as the glittering heart of the British Empire. Mainstream records boast of its wealth, with grand buildings like the Crystal Palace showcasing industrial might. But you're not in that postcard. You're brushing past a beggar in rags while a carriage rolls by, its silk-dressed occupant barely glancing at the filth below. The contrast is jarring, like a velvet curtain hiding a rotting stage. You pause near a shop window, its display of cakes and fine china mocking your empty pockets from the workhouse. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some rich Londoners carry smelling salts to fend off the street's stench, as if a whiff of lavender could erase the reality of poverty. You catch a whiff of something floral as a lady in a feathered hat glides past, her nose wrinkled like she's personally offended by your existence. The street splits the city's soul in two. One side's all marble mansions and gaslit balls, the other's the slums you just left, where families fight rats for scraps. Historians still argue whether this divide was a natural byproduct of empire or a deliberate squeeze by the elite, progress or exploitation. You're leaning toward the latter as you dodge a splash of mud from that carriage's wheels. You wander toward a grander street where top-hatted gentlemen and ladies in bustles stroll past shops selling silk gloves and silver canes. The air here smells of perfume and money, but it's no less crowded. A street sweeper, his broom worn to a nub, clears horse dung for pennies, while a banker in a tailored coat tosses him a glance like he's part of the pavement. You're tempted to yell, "Nice priorities, mate," but you're too tired, and besides, your voice would drown in the clatter of omnibuses. A kid selling newspapers shouts about a society gala, and you wonder if they know about the kids in factories, their hands scarred for a shilling a week. You pass a charity stall where a woman in a pristine dress hands out bread to deserving poor, her smile as stiff as her corset. You're not sure if you qualify, your coat's more holes than fabric, but you're too proud to beg. A man nearby jokes that the rich throw crumbs to feel holy, and you smirk, but the truth bites. The wealthy live in Belgravia, their homes glowing with gaslight, while you're headed back to a tenement where 8 share a room. You spot a poster for a music hall, promising laughter and song, but the ticket price might as well be £1,000,000. A flower girl offers you a wilted rose, her eyes hopeful, and you wish you could trade a smile for it, but smiles don't pay. The street hums with life, but it's a divided pulse. A policeman nods to a gentleman in a top hat, but glares at a ragged boy selling matches.
You're caught in the middle, invisible to the rich, too lucky to be pitied. You joke to yourself that maybe you should try those smelling salts, might make the city's stench bearable. But as you trudge on, the glitter of wealth fades behind you, and the reality of the slums looms ahead. The city's divide isn't just streets, it's a chasm, and you're teetering on the edge, wondering if you'll ever cross it.
You're trudging away from the glittering divide of London's rich and poor, the shine of wealth fading as you plunge back into the city's grimy heart. Now, the streets turn foul in a new way. Open sewers spill their stench, and you're wading through a city drowning in its own waste. By the 1880s, London's sanitation is a crisis. Mainstream records note the Great Stink of 1858 forced Parliament to act, but the sewers still overflow, turning streets into rivers of filth. You step carefully, your boots squelching in a puddle that's definitely not rainwater. The air reeks of decay, sharp enough to make your eyes water, and you pull your scarf tighter, wishing for that rich lady's smelling salts. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Londoners toss orange peels into cesspools, believing it sweetens the smell, about as effective as perfume on a pig. You spot a peel bobbing in a gutter, and it's not helping. The street's a swamp of mud, sewage, and who knows what, and you're dodging piles that make those tenement floors seem clean. Historians still argue whether the slow sewer reforms were due to bureaucratic inertia or just the sheer cost of fixing a city this broken, laziness or bankruptcy. You're not sure, but the slimy cobblestones underfoot suggest nobody's winning this fight. You pass a group of kids playing near an open drain, their laughter mixing with the gurgle of waste. One slips, splashing into the muck, and you wince, remembering that cholera-laced water. A woman hauling laundry mutters about the stink being worse than her husband's socks, and you crack a smile, but it fades when you see the greenish stream flowing past her bare feet. The city's building new sewers thanks to engineer Joseph Bazalgette, but they're not everywhere yet. You spot a man with a cart scooping sludge to sell as fertilizer. Grim work, but he's whistling like it's a Sunday stroll. You're tempted to ask if he's got a spare nose plug. A horse cart rumbles by, its wheels spraying filth, and you jump back, barely saving your coat. The driver yells an apology, or maybe a curse. It's hard to tell over the stench. You pass a pub where the smell of ale fights a losing battle against the sewer's reek. A drunk stumbles out, joking that the street's better than a bath, and you'd laugh if your lungs weren't staging a protest. You notice a faded sign warning against dumping rubbish, but the heap of rotting vegetables nearby suggests nobody's listening. A rat bold as a landlord scurries across your path, and you're half tempted to follow it to cleaner ground. The street slopes downward, and you're forced to wade through a shallow stream of sewage, your boots now officially a lost cause. You spot a woman selling clean water from a barrel, but after that pump scare, you're not falling for it. The city's pulse feels sluggish here, choked by its own waste. A newsboy shouts about a new sewer tax, and the crowd grumbles. Nobody wants to pay for pipes they can't see. You keep moving, the stench clinging to you like a bad memory. The gas lamps flicker, casting light on the glistening streets, and you're starting to think survival in London means holding your breath and hoping for a miracle. You're still slogging through Victorian London's reeking streets, the sewer stench trailing you like an unwanted guest. The air shifts now, carrying the sharp bite of gin as you pass a rickety gin shop, its sign swinging in the damp breeze. Gin is the city's cheap escape, and in the 1880s, it's drowning more lives than the Thames.
Mainstream records estimate over 20,000 gin shops and illegal dram houses fuel addiction across London. You step inside, the room dim and sticky, filled with bleary-eyed workers and women in faded shawls. The barman pours a glass of Mother's Ruin, its fumes strong enough to strip paint. You hesitate, remembering that cholera-tainted water. But here, gin's safer than the pumps, and that's a grim kind of math. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some gin shops sell a drink called Blue Ruin, so strong it's said to make you see stars, or maybe just the bottom of a ditch. You eye a man in the corner, his face red as a beet, singing to a bottle like it's his sweetheart. The place is packed, bodies pressed close, and the air smells of sour sweat and spilled spirits. Historians still argue whether gin was a symptom of poverty's despair or its cause. Did the poor drink to forget, or did gin keep them poor? You're not sure, but the woman next to you, clutching a chipped glass, looks like she's forgotten more than just her troubles. You sip the gin, and it burns like liquid regret, but it dulls the ache in your bones from that tenement floor. A woman offers you a seat, her smile wobbly, and jokes that gin's cheaper than a doctor and twice as fun. You chuckle, but her hollow eyes tell a different story. The shop's walls are stained with smoke, and a cracked mirror reflects the crowd's weary faces. You overhear talk of gin palaces, fancier joints with brass and glass. But this dive is all splintered wood and broken dreams. A kid, no older than 12, slips in to sell matches, and the barman shoos him out, probably because he's cutting into the gin profits. The noise grows louder. Laughter, arguments, someone sobbing in a corner. You spot a poster warning about drunkard's doom, but it's half torn, like nobody cares. A man stumbles past, muttering about losing his job to a bender, and you wonder if he'll end up in that workhouse. The gin's cheap, but it comes at a cost. Families starve while parents drink, and the streets outside are littered with those who never made it home. A fiddler in the corner plays a tune so mournful it could make a rat cry, and you toss him a glance, wishing you had a penny to spare. Instead, you finish your drink, the burn a brief distraction from the city's weight. You step back into the street, the gin's warmth fading fast in the chilly air. The shop's glow lingers behind you, but so does the image of that woman's empty stare. You pass another gin cart, its vendor joking that his brew cures all but poverty. You force a smile, but your stomach twists. Gin might numb the pain, but it's just another trap in this city. The cobblestones gleam under gas lamps, and you hear a distant shout, maybe a fight or just another drunk. You keep moving, the taste of gin still sharp on your tongue, wondering if London's drowning in spirits as much as it's choking on sewage. The night's young, but you're already tired of its promises.
You're stumbling out of the gin shop, the sharp sting of Blue Ruin still burning your throat as you weave back into Victorian London's grimy streets. The air's no cleaner, but now your head's buzzing, and you're noticing the quack doctors hawking cures for every ailment under the sun. Medicine in the 1880s is a wild gamble. Mainstream advances like Joseph Lister's antiseptic surgery are saving lives in hospitals, but on the streets, you're more likely to find snake oil than salvation. You pause by a cart where a man in a top hat, looking like he's auditioning for a circus, peddles a bottle of miracle elixir that smells like turpentine and despair. You're tempted, if only to wash out the gin's aftertaste, but that cholera scare keeps you wary. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some doctors sell pills made of chalk and sugar, claiming they cure everything from toothache to heartbreak, about as useful as a prayer in a thunderstorm. You dodge the salesman's pitch, his voice booming like he's selling salvation itself. The crowd around him is a mix of desperate and curious, clutching pennies for a cure that'll likely make them sicker. Historians still argue whether these quack remedies were harmless placebos or deadly scams, ignorance or greed. You're leaning toward greed as you spot a woman coughing up a storm, clutching a bottle of lung tonic that's probably just flavored gin. You keep moving, passing a chemist's shop with jars of leeches in the window, their slimy wiggle making your stomach lurch. Leeches are still a go-to for balancing humors, and you're glad nobody's trying to slap one on you. A street vendor offers a fever powder that he swears saved his aunt, but his shifty eyes suggests his aunt's either fictional or very unlucky. You joke to yourself that you'd rather trust that orange peel in the sewer than this guy's powder. The street's alive with shouts of cure-alls and tonics, but you're not buying. Literally, since your pockets are still empty from that workhouse stint. A woman in a tattered shawl stops you, begging for a penny to buy medicine for her kid. You want to help, but you're broke, and her hollow eyes mirror the gin shop's despair. You point her to a free dispensary you heard about, but it's miles away, and her cough sounds like it's racing against time. The city's medical reality is brutal. Hospitals are for the lucky few, while the poor rely on quacks or nothing. You pass a man selling electric belts to restore vigor, and a bystander jokes it's just a belt with extra lies. You smirk, but the laughter fades when you see a boy, pale as ash, limping past with a bandage that's more dirt than cloth. The street darkens as clouds roll in, and you're dodging more carts, their owners promising health in a bottle. One claims his syrup cures the London cough from that pea soup fog, but you're not convinced. Your throat's still scratchy from it. The city's pulse feels feverish now. It's people chasing cures that don't exist, while real doctors are out of reach. You spot a poster for a magnetic healer, and you roll your eyes. Magnets might attract coins, but they won't fix a broken city. You keep walking, the quack's shouts fading, but the weight of London's desperation clings to you like damp air. Survival here means dodging more than thieves. It's about outsmarting the very cures that promise to save you. You're still trudging through Victorian London's chaotic streets, the quack doctor's shouts fading as you dodge another splash of filth from the sewers. Now, the clatter of hooves and wheels drowns out the hawkers, and you're caught in the mayhem of the city's transport. Horse-drawn omnibuses and cabs choke the roads. Mainstream records from the 1880s estimate over 50,000 horses power London's transport, leaving streets buried in mud and manure. You're trying to cross a bustling road, but it's like stepping into a stampede. A handsome cab nearly clips you, its driver cursing as you stumble back onto the curb, your boots caked in a mix of mud and something you're pretending isn't horse-dung. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some cabbies tie onions to their horses' tails, swearing it keeps the flies away, as if flies are the worst thing on these streets. You spot a horse with a wilted onion swinging behind it, and you're not sure whether to laugh or gag. The road's a mess, slick with muck, and you're dodging carts, carriages, and pedestrians who move like they've got a personal vendetta against you. Historians still argue whether this transport chaos was a sign of London's vitality or just poor planning, growth or gridlock. You're leaning toward gridlock as a cartwheel sprays your coat with mud, making it a match for those tenement floors. You weave through the crowd, passing a street sweeper shoveling manure into a cart, his face grim as if he's lost all hope. An omnibus lumbers by, packed with passengers who look as thrilled as you felt in that gin shop. The driver yells at a boy darting across the road,
and you wince, remembering those factory kids who probably dodge these streets daily. A woman selling apples from a basket jokes that her fruit's cleaner than the roads, and you crack a smile, but your stomach's still grumbling from that market's slim pickings. You're tempted to grab an apple, but your pockets are as empty as ever. The noise is relentless. Hooves clopping, wheels creaking, vendors shouting over the din. You spot a crossing sweeper, a kid clearing a path through the muck for a penny, his broom more twig than tool. You wish you could tip him, but you're broke, and he's already on to the next customer, a gentleman in a top hat who doesn't even glance down. A broom carriage rolls past, its polished wood gleaming, but the horse stumbles, and you realize even the rich aren't immune to these treacherous roads. You joke to yourself that maybe you should have bought that quack's vigor belt to outrun this chaos, but speed won't help when every step's a slip. You finally cross the street, nearly tripping over a broken cobblestone. The air's thick with coal smoke and the sour tang of horse sweat, and you're coughing again, that fog's ghost lingering in your lungs. A newsboy shouts about a cab accident in Cheapside, and you're not surprised. These streets are a battlefield. You pass a stable where horses are fed moldy hay, and you wonder if they're as fed up as you are. The city's pulse is frantic here, driven by hooves and desperation, but you keep moving, hoping the next turn doesn't land you under a wheel. London's transport is a beast, and you're just trying to stay out of its way. You've just escaped the chaotic snarl of London's horse-drawn streets, your boots still caked with mud from that near miss with a cab. Now, you're drawn toward a looming factory, its chimneys belching smoke that blends with the city's ever-present haze. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing, and by the 1880s, London's factories churn out everything from textiles to iron. Mainstream records credit them with powering Britain's global dominance, but at a brutal cost. You step inside, and the noise hits like a hammer. Clanging machines, hissing steam, and the shouts of workers struggling to be heard. The air's thick with coal dust, coating your throat like you've swallowed a fireplace, and you're already coughing, that fog's sting fresh in your memory. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some factory owners hang canaries in cages to detect gas leaks. Poor birds, trading songs for a one-way trip to the coal mine. You spot one chirping feebly above a loom, and you're not sure if it's warning you or just begging for fresh air. The factory floor is a maze of whirring belts and spinning wheels, and you're handed a rag to wipe down a machine that looks like it could eat your arm for breakfast. Historians still argue whether factories were the engine of progress or a meat grinder for the poor, wealth or wreckage. You're leaning toward wreckage as you see a worker, his hand bandaged, limp past, likely another victim of those hungry gears. You're surrounded by faces as gray as the walls, men and women hunched over tasks that never end. A girl, no older than those factory kids you saw before, feeds thread into a machine, her fingers moving like she's racing death itself. You remember those tenement rooms where these workers probably collapse at night, and you wonder how they keep going. A man nearby jokes that the factory's warmer than his landlord's heart, but his cough says the heat's not worth the price. You wipe the machine, the rag turning black in seconds, and your back's already screaming from the effort. The overseer, a sour-faced man with a clipboard, glares like you're personally insulting his profits. The air's so thick you can taste the soot, and your eyes sting as you squint through the dim light. A worker mutters about a mate who lost a leg to a boiler explosion last week, and you glance at the hissing pipes, wondering if they're plotting the same. You joke to yourself that maybe that quack's vigor belt could have given you the strength to outrun this place, but no belt's saving you from the grind. A whistle blows, signaling a shift change, but it's no relief, just another wave of exhausted faces replacing the last. You spot a woman sneaking a sip of water, probably from a tainted bucket, and you wince, hoping she's luckier than most. You step outside for a moment, gasping for air, but the factory's smoke chases you, blending with the city's smog. The streets no quieter. Carts rumble, vendors shout, and the factory's hum leaks through the walls. A boy selling coal dust for fuel offers you a grin, saying it's cheaper than a coffin. You force a smile, but the weight of the factory lingers, its noise and dust a reminder of London's relentless hunger for progress. You're back on the street, but the factory's shadow follows, its smoke curling around you like the city itself, grinding down everyone in its path.
You've just stepped out of the factory's choking grip, the smoke still clinging to your clothes as you wander back into Victorian London's relentless streets. The city's weight, its filth, its hunger, its grind has you exhausted, but now flickers of hope catch your eye, like stars through the smog. Despite the brutality, Londoners find ways to endure, and in the 1880s, reformers like Octavia Hill push for better housing and schools, a mainstream fact showing sparks of change amid the gloom. You pause by a street corner where a crowd gathers, not for a fight or a quack cure, but for a woman handing out bread from a charity cart. Her smile, weary but warm, feels like a crack in the city's hard shell. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some East End kids form mudlark gangs, scavenging the Thames banks for coal or coins, turning survival into a game. Pirates of the muck. You spot a group of them, laughing as they dig through the river's slime, their faces bright despite the grime. The street hums with small acts of defiance. A man shares a crust with a stranger. A flower girl sings a tune that lifts the fog's weight. Historians still argue whether these glimmers of resilience were enough to counter London's hardships, or just desperate sparks in a dark age, hope or delusion. You're not sure, but the kids' laughter makes you lean toward hope, if only for a moment. You pass a schoolroom, its windows glowing, where a teacher drills kids on their ABCs, a rare chance for them to escape the factories. A boy waves at you, his hands cleaner than most, and you wave back, feeling a flicker of warmth. A street musician plays a fiddle, his hat collecting pennies from passers-by, and he jokes that his music's cheaper than gin and twice as sweet. You smile, your heart a little lighter, though your stomach still growls from that market's empty promises. The city's brutal, but these moments, small, stubborn, remind you people keep fighting. You wander toward a park, its grass patchy but green, where families share scraps of bread and stories. A woman mends a coat, her needle flashing, and she hums a lullaby that softens the street's din. You sit on a bench, the wood worn but solid, and watch a man teach his daughter to skip stones on a puddle. Never mind that it's probably sewage. He catches your eye and grins, saying, "Gotta find joy where you can." You nod, the weight of the tenements, the factory, the gin shops easing just a bit. The city's a beast, but its people are tougher, carving out light in the cracks. As the sky darkens, the gas lamps flare, casting a soft glow over the crowd. The air's still heavy, the streets still treacherous, but you feel a quiet strength in these faces, worn, yes, but not broken.
The city grinds on, its pulse relentless, yet here, in these small acts, you see something enduring. You rise, ready to keep moving, carrying their resilience with you. Now, let's slow things down. Let the city's clamor fade like a distant hum. Picture yourself leaving the crowded streets, the cobblestones softening under your feet as the gas lamps dim to a gentle flicker. The air grows lighter, the stench of sewers and smoke drifting away, replaced by a cool breeze that carries a hint of grass from that patchy park. You're walking slower now, your shoulders loosening, the weight of London's hardships slipping off like a worn-out coat. The faces you saw, those kids laughing, that woman's lullaby, linger in your mind, soft as a whisper, reminding you that even in the darkest corners, hope finds a way to bloom. You're safe now, far from the factories and gin shops, the city's pulse fading to a quiet heartbeat. Let your eyes grow heavy, your breath steady, as the streets dissolve into a calm, starry night. Sleep's calling, gentle and warm, so let it pull you under. Sweet dreams.